Sup everyone, ask and you shall receive, so comment down below on what next you guys want to see, because today I'm answering a comment when it comes to somebody needing help in whether or not they should be pulling for Ayaka, and furthermore whether they should be pulling her weapon, pulling constellations, and maybe even pulling her dedicated support Shinhe along with her. How far should you go for this character, and what's her potential right now? Why do people not talk about her as much as they used to, and how relevant is she as a result of that? All this stuff is going to be hopefully answered by the end of this video, and like I always said, my goal is never to answer these questions for you from a pure meta mathematical standpoint, right? I do use some data to support my claims here and there, but most of them are from me myself playing the game. This is my account, pretty standard Ayaka, nothing too crazy here. Have her weapon C0, that's it. Talent 868, right? Not even crowning her, so really it's just up to the artifacts. And if you guys take a quick look here, her artifacts are nothing to write home about, but they're by no means atrociously bad. Maybe something like this could be changed for something a little better, but yeah, you guys kind of see the gist of it. It's just your typical Ayaka. So since we're talking about her value in the current meta, right, we have to pay ourselves a visit to the Abyss. Sorry if that camera angle kind of caught you guys off guard a little bit, but when it comes to Ayaka and the Abyss, I think for the most part they've gelled fairly well, right? I think Ayaka, when it comes to meta wise, has stayed fairly consistent. Now here's the thing when it comes to meta characters and when people share about them, and this is to directly answer the question when the person stated, well, why isn't there more people talking about Ayaka? Is she not good? Is she bad, right? Like, because when people think that there's not enough content creators or videos or people sharing clears of certain characters and rosters, that immediately is this roster not worthy, because constantly you'll see characters such as Jiangling, Bennett, Xingqiu, they constantly pop up across multiple CN tier lists, even EN Abyss clear lists. You got to think when it comes to efficiency and reputation of these websites and content creators to share meta teams, they want to share the best available, meaning they often want to share a team that requires low investment that gives high yield. So what you'll most often see are the same couple of teams just being rinsed and repeated all across different platforms. As a result, the internet is overpopulated with those teams, and in my humble opinion, yes, to a degree, it makes them overrated. Now, are they not the best teams? Absolutely not. They're the best teams. They're likely better than what you can put together for Ayaka in this very moment. But that doesn't mean that a character such as Ayaka doesn't work. In fact, if you look at the tier list when it comes to usage rate, I know a lot of people get triggered by this, but when I refer to my usage rate, I'm talking about ownage rate and usage rate cross-reference into one list, meaning yes, ownage rate does affect the placements of these characters on this usage list. So this gives you guys a better idea of how many people owns these characters versus how many people actually use them in multiple iterations of the Abyss. It's not just one, it's multiple, and it's very up to date. It has over 120,000 data inputs here, so very reliable source. And when it comes to this, Ayaka actually doesn't fall too far behind her peers. In fact, if you want to look at her closest counterpart, which is Ganyu, right, another solid, I would say, freeze character, Ayaka actually beats Ganyu quite comfortably, and there's a few reasons for that. Her specific placement does change throughout different abysses, but what I want to show you guys is that it doesn't change by too much. She always hover, in my opinion, right below the best in slot teams for Abyss iterations. And the reason for that is because while Cryo has a huge advantage in its resonance and artifact effect, what it lacks for is a much more backloaded way of dealing damage, and its reaction doesn't really lend much to helping that. Cryo characters are built to more so front-loaded. Think Ganyu's like charge attack, think Ayaka's like instant charge attack damage, as well as her burst damage. You guys might say, oh well, her burst is kind of backloaded. Well, her burst is sustained, so you could argue it's backloaded. It's a very powerful ability, but it does heavily rely on the freeze reaction to keep enemies in place long enough for it to complete its full duration. Now, when it comes to cryo carries, these two are the only ones that's really noteworthy here. And they both kind of share a similar issue, is that there's no more ways to empower them apart from pulling for another 5-star character. And now, when the solution to your problem is like, oh, you need to pick up another premium character, you quickly start to see people shy away from this. So what ends up happening is most free-to-play players who picked up an Ayaka throughout the course of the game ends up using her sparingly. Now, it's not to say Ayaka's damage is insufficient. No, more than enough, all right? Like I keep saying, like you always keep reminding me, everyone's damage in Genshin is more than enough. But here, let me pose you a scenario. If your goal in playing Genshin is to get in, get out of Abyss fast, get your rewards every time it resets and get out, right? You don't want to mess around. You don't want to like experiment, right? Your goal is not to figure out the answer to Genshin equations. Why would you want to drag it out for yourself unnecessarily? Does that make sense? Right? This is the question I'm posing, guys. How many people watching this willingly extend their duration of the Abyss through non-meta teams or experimental teams just so they could get more enjoyment out of fighting the Abyss? I'm gonna take a wild guess, very few of you, and it's the same for other people as well, right? Surprisingly, very few people want to artificially extend the duration of their Abyss runs and clears, right? So what ends up happening is most people just use meta teams that are recommended in the current patch, and oftentimes you'll find very familiar teams at the top. It's just the same couple of teams cycling through the Abyss. So when it comes to data like Abyss usage, you'll see that characters like Ayaka, even though they're plenty strong, they're not efficient enough in their free-to-play forms to really be able to rival certain free-to-play teams. A great example is like nowadays free-to-play Hybrid Bloom. How can the old era of DPS teams really rival the efficiency of Hybrid Bloom? So when we look at stat lines like Abyss usage rate, it's unavoidable as time goes on, and a lack of newer support category of characters to support these cryo units, which severely lack damage assistance from reactions, they're gonna fall behind, right? And that's my point of this video. Ayaka, in terms of damage threshold, she can still clear the content no problem, and a well-built Ayaka, right? Well-invested Ayaka, maybe some constellations, triple crowned, and one with a Shenhe supporting her, even potentially constellation Shenhe with her signature weapon. She can still completely dominate and even surpass certain free-to-play team when it comes to damage. But when it comes to free-to-play, she can sometimes even lose to certain 4-star teams depending on what type of Abyss buffs they even get. This is extremely difficult, right? Because we're in a situation where you guys are asking me, Walrus, should I be polling Ayaka? How good is she? How relevant is she? And my answer to you right now is that she's still good and relevant. But if you want to ask me if she's the best, obviously not, right? Obviously not, because there are certain better options. Dendro has really taken the game by storm here, and for Ayaka to still even have a chance to fight against this kind of dominating force in the meta space is already a lot of credit being given to this character, because really people think the real advantages to cryo, I've mentioned in the beginning of the video, is the fact that, you know, it's easier to build certain artifacts and to stack crit damage as opposed to finding balances in your artifacts. But you see, the perceptive ones that are watching will be saying, well, Walrus, doesn't that mean that farming artifacts could be just as rough? It could, right? Because let's say you get a crit damage artifacts, you're not really in need of crit rate, but you still have to roll into crit damage. So sometimes the duration and the amount of resin dumped into artifacts isn't necessarily lower. It's just to say that you could play around with different substats, and there's not so much of an emphasis on crit rate because the fact that she's cryo, right, and runs Blizzard Strayer set. Unfortunately, we've arrived at the most painful part of the video for me to say, which is that if you're looking for efficiency, if you're looking to build a strong team, Ayaka currently just isn't that character that can offer you that, right? I would say that if you already have strong teams, you cleared the Abyss just fine, and you want to expand your horizons into freeze. Let's say you haven't really built freeze teams before and you want to build a powerful one. Ayaka is certainly the first piece of the puzzle to building a strong freeze core. So Ayaka, Kokomi, Shinhe, these are characters that eventually you want to all be able to get for your freeze team. And starting with Ayaka, completely fine. She can work with Mona, she can work with like Xingqiu, if even she can work with plenty of other characters that are not Kokomi, Shinhe. Right, and I wish you guys the best of luck if you're pulling for her. But looking at next patch, Hoyoverse is, I think, once again going back to the Dendro stuff, and I wouldn't want you guys to miss out on it. And as people keep saying, as with all Archons, they usually rerun, I would like 4 patches after their initial release, I believe, and it's been the same for all the other Archons. So 4 patches since Nahida's release is 3.6. So really think long and hard before pulling the trigger. Maybe it's in your best interest to also watch the live stream before pulling her, because you do still have, I believe, like a week after the live stream goes for 3.6 to decide whether or not you want to pull for Ayaka this patch or wait for what's coming next. All right, unfortunate to say this, but I really hope that this answer is going to help you make a better decision for your account. Pull her if you like her, she's fine, she can clear the content, but you know, when it comes to cryo, we really have little to go off of unless you Giga Whale for Shinhe and really push her ceiling much higher, and that's assuming you already have her weapon, right? So if you have any more questions, make sure to leave them down below. We can talk more about this during today's live stream. Till then, urge you to stay safe. Peace, bye bye.